to America's Newsroom. I'm Sandra Smith.
And good morning, Sandra. Good to be with you this morning. Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Shawn in for Bill Hemmer. Bill is on assignment this morning. Take a look at what police have released, a stunning new surveillance video. It shows a gunman approaching Ortiz from behind, then shooting him at nearly point-blank range.
Police arresting the alleged shooter and 5 others believed to be involved, saying they were offered thousands of dollars to kill the former Red Sox star. Here's what local officials on the ground said yesterday.
In this investigative process, we were able to obtain the weapon that was used to shoot David, which was buried in the residence in the province of Mao.
This, as Fox News has now confirmed that, yes, another American, Jonathan Cochran, has mysteriously died at an island hotel. That happened back in April.
Steve Harrigan live in the Dominican Republic with the latest on all of this that is happening, and we're learning more this morning. Steve, good morning.
Good morning, Sandra. 2 major stories that keep getting worse for the Dominican Republic. First, on the suspects. Police say they have 6, including the alleged shooter of Boston Red Sox star David Ortiz. They've also recovered the weapon used in that shooting. They say as many as 4 suspects, though, may still be at large. This has been a high-profile case for the Dominican Republic. Many people here see the Red Sox slugger as a national hero, and the Attorney General has vowed that justice will be done.
The Dominican government, the National Police, and the Justice Department recognize the symbolism that David Ortiz represents, and the commitment we have this case be solved completely.
Police say it is clear that this was no robbery. It was an assassination attempt. The 6 admitted that they were paid roughly $7,800 to kill Ortiz. That's about $1,300 apiece for the men, who are all in their 20s. What is not clear is the motive. Who ordered the hit on Ortiz and why? Police not saying anything about that. As far as the attack goes, 1 gunman got off the back of a motorcycle, entered the roadside bar where Ortiz had his back to him. He was at his usual table there on Sunday. The gunman fired a single shot. It entered Ortiz's back, exited through his stomach. As far as Ortiz's condition right now, he is in intensive care. He's had 2 surgeries, but his wife said he's been able to sit up and take a few steps, so not life-threatening at this point. In the meantime, the other story that continues to dog the Dominican Republic and threaten tourism here, a 7th, more questions raised about a 7th American dying mysteriously on the island. This time it's Jonathan Corcoran, who is the brother of the famous Shark Tank star Barbara Corcoran. Keep in mind, this death happened in April. It was reported initially as a heart attack. There's been no evidence, to be fair, presented that it's anything other than a heart attack. But as you can understand, because of this story, any family who's lost someone in the Dominican Republic in the past 12 months is beginning to raise questions about what might have happened here. Eric and Sandra, back to you.
Steve Harrigan, thank you.
And we have some breaking news out of the Middle East this morning. We're getting some brand new reaction from both the White House and the U.S. Navy after several warships assisted a pair of oil tankers, the latest that were attacked right near the strategic Strait of Hormuz. Lucas Tomlinson is live at the Pentagon with the latest developments. Hi, Lucas.
Hi, Eric. The attacks come amidst increasing tensions between the U.S. and Iran. Today, Japan's prime minister is in Tehran to try to calm down the escalating rhetoric. Both tankers were carrying Japanese petroleum products when they were attacked. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and National Security Advisor John Bolton are here at the Pentagon this morning for a pre-scheduled meeting with the acting defense secretary and chairman of the Joint Chiefs in the secured planning room known as the tank. The 2 oil tankers were damaged outside the all-important Strait of Hormuz in the Gulf of Oman. Both underway outside in the strait, near the strait, when the explosion occurred. One was left ablaze and 44 sailors had to be rescued at sea. The tankers had just left ports in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and they were en route to Asia. The distress calls came 8 minutes apart, according to the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet. Quote, "We are aware of the reported attack on shipping vessels in the Gulf of Oman. U.S. naval forces in the region received 2 separate distress calls at 6:12 a.m. local Bahrain time and a second one at 7 a.m. U.S. Navy ships in the area are rendering assistance." Officials say USS Bainbridge, a guided missile destroyer, part of the Lincoln Strike Group, is in the vicinity and rescued 21 of those sailors. The USS Abraham Lincoln, the aircraft carrier sent to the region last month, had just completed a port visit to Oman and had just gotten underway today when the incident occurred. The head of American forces in the region, General Frank McKenzie, was recently in the Middle East, warning of an unspecified imminent threat from Iran and its proxies. Iranian state media claims to have rescued sailors from at least one of the ships, and some of those sailors were taken to a port in Iran. And this comes just a month after 4 different oil tankers were attacked by mines, which the Pentagon blamed on Iran. Eric?
All right, Lucas, in a few moments, I'll be talking to General Jack Keane about Iran's suspected hand in all this. Thank you.
Meanwhile, President Trump saying he would be willing to listen if a foreign government offered him dirt on a political opponent. In a new interview, the president telling ABC News there is nothing wrong with listening, and he would not necessarily contact the FBI. Democrats seizing on those comments to ramp up calls for impeachment.
I think maybe you do both. I think you might want to listen. There's nothing wrong with listening. If somebody called from a country, Norway, we have information on your opponent. Oh, I think I'd want to hear it.
You want that kind of interference in our elections?
It's not an interference. They have information. I think I'd take it. If I thought there was something wrong, I'd go maybe to the FBI if I thought there was something wrong.
Jason Chaffetz is a former Utah congressman and a Fox News contributor. Mr. Chaffetz, good morning to you. So willing to listen. How did that sit with you when you heard the president say that in this new interview?
Well, you need to listen to what he said first. He said he would do both. He would inform the FBI and he would listen. If he thought it was wrong, he would escalate it to the FBI. This fake outrage from the left and the media is just, it's part of a pattern here. You remember, it was Hillary Clinton's husband, the former president, President Clinton, who I think it was 11 times took more than $500,000 for a speech, 11 times, while Secretary Clinton was the acting Secretary of State and presumably a candidate for the presidency of the United States. There was no outrage on that. They were expecting taking $500,000 out of Russia, for instance, and other countries. Come on, they are faking the idea that they're exasperated by the president's answer. Of course he can listen.
Got it. Obviously, Republicans are seizing on the criticism from the left this morning to point out that hypocrisy. But when the president specifically said, and I'll read his words directly, if I thought there was something wrong, I'd go maybe to the FBI if I thought there was something wrong. How did that sit with you?
I think the president, first he said he would do both, then he said that. I think that's just fine. Remember, that is markedly different than what Hillary Clinton did by proactively spending millions of dollars overseas to engage somebody, a foreign national, to dig up dirt on her opponent. The president isn't suggesting that he would proactively do that, but if somebody approached him, every single campaign I know of would listen to that material first. They absolutely would.
Well, I'll tell you who did take issue with that, and that is presidential candidates Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren. Biden tweeting this out, saying, quote, President Trump's once again welcoming foreign interference in our elections. This isn't about politics. This is a threat to our national security. An American president should not seek their aid and abet those who seek to undermine democracy. Warren tweeted, the Mueller report made it clear a foreign government attacked our 2016 elections to support Trump. Trump welcomed that help, and Trump obstructed the investigation. Now he said he'd do it all over again. It's time to impeach Donald Trump. Before I move on, clearly you can see, Jason, that the left is using this as an opportunity to further call for impeachment of this president.
For the president to say he would listen, they're going to impeach him. You know what? I'm tired of the impeachment talk. If they're going to impeach him, go ahead and do it. Go ahead and look at that Mueller report because it exonerates the president. And if they keep talking about that, then we'll keep reminding the American people that Mueller found nothing on the president.
All right, I got to ask you about this breaking news, which just came into us here. It seems to be coming as a surprise to those involved. The House Intelligence Committee has just subpoenaed Rick Gates and Michael Flynn. And of course, Rick Gates, the Trump campaign deputy campaign manager, and the former White House National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn. They want documents and testimony, Jason. So this is just coming out, and Fox News has already been able to get reaction from Rick Gates. He says he did not know about this subpoena and is now getting in touch with his lawyers.
Well, Adam Schiff is involved in a propaganda campaign. He wants this pattern, this drip, if you will, that the Trump administration and its cohorts are non-responsive. What Adam Schiff is asking for in this subpoena is something they don't have, which are the documents. The documents are no longer in their possession. For instance, with Mr. Flynn, he doesn't have these materials anymore. So they're with the administration. So again, it's a pattern of the Democrats asking, seeking, and subpoenaing documents that these people just don't have.
You know, when you mentioned Adam Schiff, the chairman of that committee, wrote in this announcement or this statement where they revealed that they have been subpoenaed, he said that they did fully cooperate with the Mueller probe, but so far have refused to cooperate fully with Congress. So we'll see where that goes. This is the president's latest tweet on all of this. Unrelated to Russia, writes the president. He says House committee now plays this seldom used contempt game than the Republicans did when they had the House majority. Republicans will remember, and of course they voted yesterday, the Oversight Committee, to hold AG Barr and Wilbur Ross in contempt, all surrounding this census question. Final thoughts on all of that. Tough to keep track of it all coming out of these committees, Jason.
I remember, because I was the chairman, you had Brian Pagliano, who was engaged and entangled as the IT specialist for Hillary Clinton. He had an immunity agreement, and yet we issued subpoenas for his presence to come before the committee, and he didn't even show up. And he had an immunity agreement. So for the Democrats, the duplicity now to take on this new role is just terrible.
We'll have a lot more on the show coming up on all of this. Jason Chafe, it's great to see you, and thank you. We will have more reaction from the White House in the next hour. Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley will be our headliner. He'll join us live at 10:30 a.m. Eastern.
It is a very busy morning. We have more breaking news after a massive protest turns violent in Memphis. The mayor there saying 24 police officers were injured as protesters threw rocks, destroyed cars, and even spit at them. We'll tell you what prompted all of this. A live report is just ahead. Plus this.
I think they really have to make a deal. A lot of companies are leaving China, as you know.
Do you have a deadline for imposing the 325?
No, I have no deadline. My deadline is what's up here. We'll figure out the deadline.
President Trump weighing in on the trade war with China and saying he will take his arguments directly to President Xi later this month. Florida Senator Rick Scott is here with a warning on the entire situation.
And have you heard what presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders has said about a socialism pitch? Why he thinks Americans would be, quote, delighted, he claims, to pay higher taxes for. We'll tell you what and bring you all the latest straight ahead here on America's Newsroom.
I do understand that I and other progressives will face massive attacks from those who attempt to use the word socialism as a slur. I have faced and overcome these attacks for decades.
Well, the White House right now following the escalating situation in the Gulf of Oman. That's just south of Iran. The U.S. Navy coming to the assistance of a pair of oil tankers that were just attacked near the strategic Strait of Hormuz. Let's bring in General Jack Keane, retired four-star general, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War and a Fox News senior strategic analyst. General, good morning. You know, 4 tankers were hit last month by these drones. Do you suspect the hidden hand of Tehran in these continuing attacks?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. There's no history of any of the other Gulf states attacking tankers in the Straits of Hormuz or the Persian Gulf writ large. This is the history belongs to Iran through the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Quds Force, which works for the IRGC, and also the Houthis out of Yemen, who are proxies for the Iranians. So this is the history. And clearly, what's the strategy here? The Iranians are trying to put pressure on the U.S. allies and the international community for the U.S. to ease off on the economic sanctions that we have imposed on Iran because they are clearly biting and having significant adverse impact. So they want pressure put on the United States, saying the United States is really causing this crisis through their sanctions, get them to ease off. That's where the Iranians, that's the hand they're trying to play.
So what they're trying to do is they're trying to squeeze us and our European allies and others and Arab allies because of the price of oil, because it's plummeted and their economy is in dire straits.
Yeah, absolutely. These sanctions that President Trump and his national security team are imposing are the worst sanctions that have ever been imposed on Iran, given also 39 years of terrible, malign behavior.
And they're really
the second thing,
it.
I think right now, yeah, they definitely are. I mean, their currency's devalued, inflation is 37%, the unemployment is rising, food shortages, power outages, civil unrest growing. I think what's happening here from a U.S. perspective is they'll take a look at this and make a judgment whether we have to begin escorting tankers through the Straits of Hormuz to protect them.
Yeah, we did that in 2015. Yeah, we did that back in the 80s.
We did it in 87, but we did it in 2015 just for a week. The Iranians had seized an oil tanker for a week or two, and we escorted tankers through there. So clearly, the military command is assessing the situation. I think we would also talk to our coalition allies about joining that, so it's not just a U.S. effort. But based on the threat, it's likely we may have to do that.
You know, it was so brazen and just unbelievable about this, almost typical of Iranian behavior, that they apparently did this while Shinzo Abe of Japan was sitting meeting with the supreme leader. Here is the president talking about Iranian behavior and how he hopes it changes.
Iran is not the same country. When I became president, Iran was a terror all over the world. They had just made this horrible deal for the United States, the Iran nuclear deal. And I became president and I terminated the deal, and Iran now is in chaos.
What will it take for that theocratic, hardline, terroristic regime to change?
More pressure. That's got to bite more on them. They haven't changed their malign, aggressive behavior, but a couple things have happened. There's less resources that they're providing to their proxies, and it's their proxies who are propping up Lebanon, running the war in Syria, the civil war, running the war in Yemen as well. So that already is a significant improvement over where we are. But we got to continue the max pressure campaign for sure here. It is absolutely critical. And, you know, the other thing is that it's reported that the two tankers that were damaged were heading to Japan. And meanwhile, Prime Minister Abe is in Tehran negotiating with Rouhani.
That's unbelievable. I know. Talk about a slap in the face. General Keane, thank you for your insight. It's going to take a lot to try and change Iranian behavior, but it seems that the sanctions are having a bite. Good to see you. Sandra?
Good talking to you.
There's a big hearing happening right now, House Intelligence Committee. As we speak, after the deep fake altered footage of Mark Zuckerberg goes viral, this snapshot of the Facebook CEO is just the latest in a string of fake videos. They're getting doctored and put out on the internet. What experts are worried about and why. Plus, the first sentence handed down in the college admissions scandal will tell you what happened to a former Stanford sailing coach.
Stanford is a place that I love. I have brought a cloud over Stanford, and for that I am deeply ashamed.
Stanford University's former sailing coach avoiding prison in the college admissions scam. A judge sentenced John Vandermeer to 2 years supervised release, despite prosecutors recommending 13 months for him behind bars. Here he is yesterday at the hearing.
I have learned much from my mistake, and I will take those lessons forward in my life. This case for me was about trying to do what I thought was right for the team. I did not take any money personally. All donations from Singer went directly to Stanford and the sailing team. My actions were wrong. I see that now. But my intentions were to help the team.
Well, Vandermeer will also pay a fine. He pleaded guilty to charges relating to arranging bribes. It happens to be the first of 50 people to be sentenced in what prosecutors have called that Varsity Blues scandal.
Every American, regardless of his or her income, is entitled to the right to a decent job that pays a living wage. The right to quality health care. The right to a complete education.
Well, that was presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders touting an economic bill of rights that would provide free health care and education for all Americans. Sanders also saying Americans would pay higher taxes if those policies were put in place. Peter Ducey's live in Washington. Peter, so why did Sanders make this speech at this point in the primary cycle?
Sandra, Sanders was signaling that if Republicans are going to try to define his proposals as strictly socialist, that's okay.
Let me be clear. I do understand that I and other progressives will face massive attacks from those who attempt to use the word socialism as a slur. But I should also tell you that I have faced and overcome these attacks for decades, and I am not the only one.
He was also trying to put socialism into historical context. Sanders argues that democratic socialism has, throughout the course of history, helped defeat what he describes as oligarchy and right-wing nationalism. So he believes it's the right prescription for certain economic challenges now.
And that is the difference between Donald Trump and me. He believes in corporate socialism for the rich and powerful. I believe in a democratic socialism that works for the working families of this country.
And Sanders did receive standing ovations at different times from the crowd on the campus at George Washington University. Sandra?
So, Peter, who just took a new and direct shot at also presidential candidate Joe Biden this morning?
It's Beto O'Rourke, who a few minutes ago plainly said he thinks Joe Biden is a return to the past.
You've got to ask yourself where Joe Biden is on the issues that are most important to you. Did he support the war in Iraq that forever destabilized the Middle East? Does he really believe that women of lower income should be able to make their own decisions about their own body and be able to afford health care in order to do that? He supported the Hyde Amendment.
It's rare to hear another Democratic candidate cite so many examples of issues with the frontrunner, but O'Rourke's polls have plummeted without taking direct shots like that at Biden, so he's trying something new. Sandra.
It was a very interesting moment there. Peter Ducey, thank you. And a reminder that tonight, Brett Baer and Martha McCallum will be hosting a town hall from Tempe, Arizona, a key state in the border crisis debate. 2020 Democratic presidential candidate Julian Castro will be on deck live at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, right here on the Fox News channel. Do not miss that.
Yeah, those have been fascinating, our town halls.
Absolutely, to learn a lot about the candidates, and Brett and Martha will ask the tough questions for sure.
And we have a Fox News alert for you. 24 Memphis police officers were injured when protests turned violent last night. The chaotic scene erupting overnight with protesters throwing rocks, destroying a police car, and they even spit at responding officers. So what prompted all of this and what happened? Jonathan Sari is following these disturbing developments from our Atlanta bureau. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Eric. All this went down in the Fraser community of Memphis. Wednesday evening, a team of U.S. Marshals encountered a suspect wanted for multiple felonies, allegedly, and they tried to apprehend him as he was getting into a vehicle. Listen.
While attempting to stop the individual, he reportedly rammed his vehicle into the officers' vehicles multiple times before exiting with a weapon. The officers fired, striking and killing the individual.
The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation has been called in to conduct an independent probe. The shooting sparked angry protests that went late into the night. Local police and deputies were called in to assist. According to Memphis Mayor Jim Strickland, at least 24 officers were injured, 6 of them hospitalized. And the mayor says at least 2 journalists were injured, and vandals damaged multiple police cars, a business, and a fire station. The mayor posted on Facebook, "Let me be clear, the aggression shown toward our officers and deputies tonight was unwarranted." But Shelby County Commissioner Tammy Sawyer, who's also running for mayor, posted a tweet decrying the U.S. Marshal-involved shooting. Sawyer writes, "Every life lost should matter, every single one. How many times will this be okay? It cannot continue to be." Police used tear gas to disperse the crowd, which cleared around 11 o'clock last night, and authorities say at least 3 people have been arrested. Eric, back to you.
What a shame. All right, Jonathan, thank you. Sandra?
President Trump threatening tougher measures if the deal with Mexico does not stop the flow of migrants over our southern border. But the president saying Mexico is doing its part to help alleviate the crisis.
Mexico's moving 6,000 troops to their southern border. That's a lot of troops. If Mexico does a great job, then you're not going to have very many people coming up. If they don't, then we have phase 2. Phase 2 is very tough, but I think they're going to do a good job.
Let's bring in Matt Albence, the Deputy Director of ICE. Matt, I want to welcome you to America's Newsroom. I think it's the first time we've had you on this program. It's good to get you here and get your thoughts on what's happening. This deal was made with Mexico. The president made some threats on tariffs. Mexico came to the table. A deal was announced. Is this helping the situation at the border?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. If Mexico does what they say they're going to do, it will be a huge help to what's going on in the border. These individuals are coming from these Northern Triangle countries primarily, but now from all around the world, as we've recently seen, coming to our border because they know that because Congress has failed to fix the loopholes in our immigration laws, that we can't detain them and they'll be released into our country. If they can't even get to the United States and have to remain in Mexico or get stopped in Guatemala or somewhere else in the Northern Triangle, then yes, that's going to change the entire dynamic.
I hear a big if from you there, and the president said something similar. If Mexico does a great job, he said phase 2 is very tough. What is the likelihood that Mexico can follow through on its end of this deal?
I think the likelihood that they can is 100%. Whether they will or not, that remains to be seen. We're hopeful.
We have yet to see how that will all play out. You know, you're the number 2 guy there at ICE. I believe you've been in the role for a year or so. Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct.
As far as what you are seeing, a firsthand account at the border, how would you describe it?
Well, it is. It's a humanitarian crisis. It's a border security crisis. It's a public safety crisis. Unfortunately, Congress has failed to fix the crisis, and now, as we can see going through the reprogramming efforts and the 2020 budget they propose, they're not even willing to fund us properly to manage the crisis. So without the money and the resources and no changes to the laws, this crisis is not going to abate itself.
Here's Kevin McAleenan, the DHS chief, and how he describes the current situation. Kevin McAleenan.
I want to make clear that this crisis is unlike anything we've ever seen at our border, and it, in large part, is due to the gaps in our immigration laws that are driving it. Any of our men and women on the border can tell you that DHS facilities are overflowing, that our resources are stretched thin.
You know, time and time again, we hear from him, we hear from the head of ICE, we hear from you now, this frustration over the situation at our border, the developing situation there, the worsening of the migrant situation. How confident are you? I hear you calling on Congress that we can come to a solution and get something done to improve the situation at our southern border.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, Congress has failed to act. I don't have a lot of confidence that they will going forward. The men and women of ICE and CBP and DHS throughout the agency will continue to do the best that we can to manage this crisis. And what we need to point out is this is not just a border crisis. These individuals are not staying in these border communities. They're coming into the country, and they're going to communities throughout the country. So this is a public safety and border security crisis that impacts the whole country. It's not limited to the southwest border.
I want to hear from earlier this week, another situation that we're watching. This is Ronald Coleman from Health Access California, who is speaking about the plan to cover young illegals. Obviously, you're talking about the situation in our country as well, but not expanding it to the elderly. This is due to budget concerns because California is set to become the first state to extend health benefits to those who live in the USA illegally. Let's hear from him first, and I'll get your response.
We do hope ultimately to get to a place to where California can ultimately cover the entire undocumented population, but certainly we were disappointed not to see those 30,000 seniors get covered in this cycle.
What do you even think about something like that?
Well, I couldn't speak to California laws, but what we have seen throughout this immigration experience is that as long as you can continue to incentivize illegal behavior, it's the height of idiocy to think that you're going to get any less of it.
The California Immigrant Policy Center called the program a clear step forward, but lamented the decision to block the elderly from the plan. It's a fascinating thing to see play out, and it's great to get your take on this program, Matt, for the first time. We appreciate you being here. We hope you come. Thanks.
Sorry for Boston. Always next year.
All right. All right, moving on to this, President Trump weighing in on those new polls from yesterday showing Joe Biden and others beating him in the 2020 race.
I don't believe those polls. There's no way he beats me in Texas. But even your own polls show you're behind right now, don't they? No, my polls show that I'm winning everywhere.
Meanwhile, a new poll showing movement among Democrats in one key state. We'll have a lot more on all of this with our A-team on deck next hour.
And President Trump, well, he's refusing to put a deadline on those trade talks with China. is Florida Senator Rick Scott. Well, he's sounding the alarm on Beijing's growing influence. There he is waiting for our tough questions. Rick Scott coming up next.
We've been screwed for decades by Republican and Democratic administrations who never held China to account. The president just wants to make sure that these agreements work.
The First Lady making some rare comments at the White House yesterday. Melania Trump speaking out about the opioid epidemic in our country.
It's very important that you open up and ask for help. So I always say, love yourself more than you love drugs. And I will continue to do so to bring the awareness how dangerous drugs are.
Those comments in line with her Be Best campaign, focusing on raising awareness about bullying and erasing stigmas associated with drug problems.
I think that we'll end up making a deal with China. We have a very good relationship, although it's a little bit testy right now, as you would expect. I think they really have to make a deal.
But just my original question, sir, was, do you have a deadline for imposing the 325?
No, I have no deadline. My deadline is what's up here. We'll figure out the deadline.
Well, that's President Trump, of course, at a news conference at the White House. He was attending one with his Polish counterpart. The president, as you heard, refusing to set a deadline for any trade deal with China before imposing tariffs on another $325 billion worth of Chinese goods. What will happen? Florida Senator Rick Scott serves on the Armed Services and Homeland Security Committees and joins us now. Senator Scott, good to see you. The president, by pointing to his head, saying it's in there, do you think he's really keeping the Chinese off base? I mean, how do they deal with this when they don't know what they're dealing with?
Well, first off, I think the president's right. He's trying to get a deal done, but I don't believe there's going to be a deal. I actually never believed there would be a deal. I mean, China's been stealing our technology for decades. They don't open up their market. They track all their citizens through facial technology, but then sell fentanyl. They can't figure out where the fentanyl's been produced in their country and sell that in our country. They're helping Maduro commit genocide down in Venezuela. China is not our friend. They're not our partner. They will never be a deal. Plus, they negotiate a deal and then they never happen. Once somebody changes their mind in the middle of a deal, after you negotiate something, there's no trust left. There's no deal going to happen.
Yeah, they inserted some language that changed the whole deal, the president said in the last time, so they scrapped it.
Yeah, I mean, they don't want to comply. They don't comply with the World Trade Organization rules. I mean, they're a bad actor. They're not our friend. They're in the South China Sea. They're militarizing that area of the world. I mean, we have to understand, they are our adversary. Stop buying anything from China. They are not our friend.
Well, that's easier said than done, considering all the billions of dollars of trade that we have. So what does the president do at the end of the month at the G20 when he sits down with President Xi? I mean, you say a deal can't be worked out. Isn't it in their interest to try and get this behind them?
Well, look, I think he ought to continue to talk, and it doesn't hurt to have a conversation, but you have to be realistic. They cannot succeed unless they're cheating. They can't succeed unless they steal technology. They cannot open up their markets. They can't compete with American companies. So we will not get a deal. The only thing the president can do is add the tariffs. So that will happen. Now, I think anything we collect in tariffs, we ought to give back to the American public in tax reductions. But it's going to help American companies long term, and hopefully it'll impact China. Stop being a bad actor.
We've seen the damage that some of the tariffs have done, especially to the farmers in the West dealing with soybeans and other crops. You said give them money back. What if there's such pain in the heartland of this country in dealing with these tariffs, and that could boomerang on us and have the opposite intended effect?
Well, first off, with regard to our farmers, I mean, what we've got to do is got to figure out how do we help them compete in the world market. There's other markets. We need to help them with that. It is going to help our manufacturers, and because they'll be able to better compete. They'll stop them from stealing technology from our companies. So I think long term this is going to pay off. And we have to remember, if we just sit here and keep doing the same thing that we've done with prior administrations, when we get the same result. China stealing our technology, competing with us, not opening their markets, building up a military to compete with us. I mean, so the president's doing the right thing. He's got to stand up, but I don't see any way of getting a deal done.
Yeah, finally, there was an astounding study from the former Pentagon officials that said China by 2030 could potentially overtake us in the economy and in the military technology. Do you feel, with their spreading through Latin America and spreading through Africa and making deals all over the globe, that they are a real competitive and threat to our national security?
There is no ifs, ands about it. They are absolutely a threat. What they're doing with their military, with profits from things we buy from them, they're absolutely going to continue to be a bad actor and be a worse actor if we don't stop them now.
Well, the meeting is at the end of the month at the G20. We'll see.